All right, so you want to dive into the world of insurance fraud investigation. You've given us a ton of research to unpack here.
Absolutely, yeah. And it goes way beyond just like the image of a detective with a magnifying glass,
Right.
We're talking data analysis, tech skills, even a little bit of psychology comes into play.
That's like Sherlock Holmes meets the Matrix, almost.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, before we get ahead of ourselves,
Right.
what does an insurance fraud investigator actually do all day?
So picture this. You've got a house fire, right? But something about the story seems off. Or maybe a car accident that seems a little too convenient. Those are the red flags that send an investigator digging.
Okay, so every day is like an episode of like a true crime show.
Yeah, you got it.
Right.
And your research points out that it can be any kind of insurance too. Your car, your house, healthcare. I even saw some stuff on cybercrime.
Wow. So we're not just talking about somebody faking a slip and fall at the grocery store.
No, this goes way beyond that.
Okay, so that's a ton of ground to cover.
Mm.
With all that information, how does an investigator even know where to start?
And that's where it gets really interesting. Your sources talk about this new breed of investigator, like a data detective.
Okay.
It's not just about interviews and stakeouts anymore. We're talking about diving into databases, using software to find inconsistencies, even AI and machine learning to connect the dots.
Hold on. AI is getting involved in this too.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Think about it. There's so much information to go through. Policies, claims, customer histories.
Right.
AI can analyze all that, even look for subtle clues in the language of a claim that a human might miss.
That makes sense, actually. In this age of, big data,
Yeah.
It takes big technology to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly.
Okay, my brain is like buzzing with the possibilities here.
Yeah.
But let's be real. It can't all be high-tech thrills and uncovering big schemes.
Right.
What about the potential downsides to this career?
So it's not all sunshine and roses, right? But there are definitely some great things about this job. Your research mentioned the salary potential. Always a plus.
Yeah, that's always good to hear.
Right. And because it's constantly evolving, job security is a big one.
So you're saying this could be like a recession-proof career path?
Yeah, potentially. But it's important to be realistic about the downsides, too.
Okay, let's hear it.
Your sources were very upfront about the stress level. Long hours can be a factor. And let's face it, you're dealing with people trying to pull one over on you.
Right.
It can be a little bit intense.
It definitely sounds like it takes a certain kind of person. Someone who can handle the pressure, think on their feet. Not your average desk job.
Right, exactly.
But let's say, okay, you're up for the challenge. Where do you even begin with a career like this?
Well, the good news is your research actually lays out a pretty clear path. We can break it down step by step.
Okay.
From newbie investigator all the way up to seasoned pro. And it looks like you were curious about those entry-level positions, right? Like, what does a typical day look like for, say, an insurance fraud investigator trainee?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you're fresh out of school. Maybe you've got a criminal justice degree or something.
Right.
You land that first job. What are you actually doing in those early days?
Well, don't expect to be running your own investigations right off the bat. It's more like an apprenticeship.
Right.
You're learning the ropes from the more experienced investigators.
Okay.
You'll be doing a lot of research, gathering evidence, maybe analyzing policies and premiums, getting a feel for the different types of fraud and how to spot them.
So lots of shadowing, taking notes, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Building that foundation before you go out on your own.
Okay, so you've put in the work, learned from the best. Now you're ready for more responsibility, right?
Right.
What's next?
So that's typically when you'd move up to a junior investigator role.
Okay.
And that's where you really start applying all that knowledge you've gained.
Mm.
You'll be conducting your own investigations, interviewing people, gathering evidence, building your cases.
So this is where the real detective work begins.
It is. And it comes with a lot of responsibility. You're making decisions that have real-world consequences for people.
Right.
It's not just about catching the bad guys. Your sources really emphasized the ethical side of this job.
That's a heavy weight, for sure. But also pretty rewarding, I imagine, to know that you're playing a part in keeping things fair.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say you've proven yourself as a junior investigator. You're thorough, objective, you can handle the pressure. What's the next step up that ladder?
Well, then you're looking at becoming a senior insurance fraud investigator.
Okay, so the big leagues.
Pretty much. And of course, you need the experience. But your research also stressed the importance of leadership at that level.
Makes sense.
Strategic thinking. a deep understanding of how the industry works.
Okay, so it's not just about being a good investigator, it's about being a leader.
Exactly. You might be managing a team of investigators even, developing new ways to fight fraud as technology changes.
Wow. And I know you found some really interesting stuff about prepping for those job interviews too.
Oh yeah. The sources you gave me had some pretty tough questions. They really want to see how you think under pressure.
Like you're already on the case.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's throw out a few of those questions. One that stood out to me was, tell me about a time you successfully identified and investigated a fraudulent claim. Talk about pressure. Where do you even begin with that one?
Well, that's where all that prep comes in. You need a story, a good one, that shows off your skills. But you don't just want to brag. You have to walk them through your process.
So it's less about look what I did and more about here's how I think.
Right. Did you spot something nobody else did? Did you use your knowledge to uncover something? Those are the details they want.
It's about showing them that you can solve problems in a unique way.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of staying ahead of the game, there was another question that caught my eye. How do you stay up to date with the latest trends in insurance fraud investigation? Because let's face it, technology changes so fast.
It really does. So what did your research say about, continuous learning?
That you can't just learn the basics and call it a day. Your sources all agreed. You have to be constantly learning, going to conferences, reading up on the latest trends, talking to other people in the field. Always be learning. But all of this actually brings us to something that your research brought up again and again. It's like a central theme to all of this. And that's technology.
Yeah.
It really feels like technology is changing everything about how this kind of investigation happens.
It is. And your research makes it really clear. The future of insurance fraud investigation.
Sure.
Totally tied to technology.
Okay, so what does that mean for someone who's just starting out? Right. Do they need to be coding whiz kids?
Yeah.
Building their own AI in the basement?
Well, I don't think you need to go that far. But being comfortable with technology, that's huge. It's really more about the mindset. Being willing to learn new things as technology changes. So the stuff you learn today might be old news tomorrow.
Exactly. You've got to be ready to adapt.
It's instead of just, dusting for fingerprints, you got to be able to crack a firewall or something.
Right, right. But, and this is important, the human element is still crucial.
Okay.
You can have all the fancy tech in the world, but you still need that human brain to analyze, to strategize, to connect the dots in a way that AI can't quite do.
So it's not one or the other. It's both. That creative spark, that ability to see the whole picture, that's what makes a great investigator, no matter what the technology looks like.
I totally agree. And as you keep exploring this career path, there's one question from your research that I think is worth keeping in mind.
Okay, what's that?
It was something like, how can you use technology to be a better fraud fighter?
Oh, that's good.
Right. It's about owning that relationship with technology. Always be learning. Always be pushing the boundaries.
That's a great takeaway, actually. Because at the end of the day, that's what this job is all about.
Yeah.
Finding new ways to stay ahead of the game.
Absolutely. And I think with everything we've talked about today, you've got a really good grasp on what it takes to be successful in this field.
It's definitely been eye-opening.
It's a career where you can have a real impact, fighting financial crime, protecting people.
And who knows, maybe you'll be back here on the Deep Dive someday, sharing your story as a seasoned pro.
I wouldn't rule it out.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for diving into this with me. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure.